Welcome back, Stroke Warriors. I'm your host, Ralph Cortese, and today we're diving into a topic that's close to most hearts, caregiving after stroke and traumatic brain injury. Um, our guest today is a real good friend of Stroke Warrior Radio, so please welcome Michelle Taschereau, a certified brain injury specialist and wellness coach who founded Atlas Brain Health. Welcome.
Thanks, Ralph. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. Um, I'm gonna start with before everything changed for you and your husband and family. What did life look like for you and your loved ones?
I think life, is always filled with a lot of possibilities and hope and dreams. There's you take everything for granted. So it's just one of those scenarios that you're not really thinking, you're dreaming a lot. You're dreaming a lot about making plans and what you're going to do. And everything can change in one moment,
Yeah,
it can all
yeah,
gone. Mhm.
yeah. We talked about that before. We're kind of on a glide path before
Mm-hmm.
all of this, and then afterwards, it's like bam, everything changes.
Yeah, you're set into a whole new reality, that's for sure. And you take things a lot more seriously. You're far more intentional.
Yeah, very true. When and how did you step into the role of caregiver?
I don't know if I could actually specifically give a time or a place. I think it was just a natural, organic journey. You know, um, when your loved one is struggling, you're there for your loved one as they are there for you. And so you just start walking the walk and learning as you go, just as they're doing. And so, it became very evident to me early on that he suffered um, from this brain injury. I mean, we had the diagnosis of a moderate to severe brain injury. However, um, he was still able to do certain things, or he believed he was, and so, but it became very evident to me that he wasn't able to do certain things, and so navigating that really put me forward into that caregiving
Hmm.
role.
And your husband had a TBI from an accident, I think,
He had a
wasn't it?
TBI from a motorcycle accident. And so he also had other physical injuries due to that. So, there was a lot of things going on outside of just the brain injury.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, so so like I said, it was just one of those things that it just becomes part of your life. It shifts, it changes, and it's just like you start taking on these roles. And unfortunately, because it was a motorcycle accident, insurance, vehicle insurance was involved, and that's a really challenging it's really challenging to navigate here where I live, that's for sure.
Well, let's talk about that, navigating the healthcare system. Um,
Mhm.
you're in Canada, so your system's a little different from us. There's limitations on a lot of stuff, correct?
Yeah, so we are very fortunate that we do have a free medical system, and so you get the care and attention that you need when you need it. However, when it is a insurance based, it's very different. Here in
Oh,
British Columbia, we have ICBC, which is the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, and they insure for motor vehicles. Unfortunately, if they're involved, our regular healthcare system kind of stops. So you still get the immediate acute care, but then when you go home, all of your occupational therapy, physiotherapy, kinesiology, whatever, all of that is done through ICBC insurance and not actually through our healthcare system. And because it's an insurance company, and at some point they're going to be obligated to give you a lump sum of money. At this time, that was the case anyways, when we had it stipulated a certain way. Um, they limit how much care they give you. And that's the really unfortunate thing. It was very limited. We had a lot of reports as to what he needed, but then getting funding for those needs was extremely limited. So there was a lot of fighting on our end, a lot of fighting on our end.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. So that was I guess, turning point maybe that you found your voice advocating for your loved one. When did you realize you needed to advocate for yourself too?
I think I think that, to be clear, my husband advocated for himself too. And I'm really,
Okay.
really happy that he did that. He he's a very stubborn gentleman. And he's kind of black and white in the sense of his thinking. And so he always wanted to make sure that he was advocating for himself too. And I'm grateful for that. So it wasn't just left for me. In many cases, we'd advocate together.
Nice.
And I think that really helped him a lot on the journey because he had that autonomy to make these decisions and these choices. So it wasn't just me doing that. He also always tried to ensure that I was looking after myself and making sure that I was well looked after. And so, he would ensure that he would give me little gifts of a day at a spa or something to that effect, to ensure that I was looking after myself because he didn't want to feel like a burden. And he was grateful for everything I was doing to assist, and so I'm really fortunate that way. Not everybody has it that lucky, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
very true. Did you, what was the early recovery like? I mean, you had to fight with the insurance company. What was the therapies like? I mean, did it help? Or did you wind up maybe becoming more self-sufficient in therapy?
Yeah, so the very first couple years was a lot of assessments, to be honest. It was assessment after assessment. And because of the way the insurance was run at that time, the insurance company would get their own assessments, we would get our own assessments with our lawyers, and and obviously they wouldn't be the same because they, for
Yeah,
some reason, they're not. And so
they don't want to spend their money.
they don't. And it's so there was a lot of assessments going on, so trying to navigate what they're suggesting and what was a priority was a big challenge. And some of the offerings were very limited. Even the occupational therapy that we were offered was extremely limited and not really effective. It was more focused on things that they wanted him to do versus what he wanted him to do. So it wasn't very person-centered, and which of course is very frustrating to anybody who's trying to heal and trying to move on with their life. So we ended up doing several different therapies on our own and paying for it privately in order to get the care that he needed. And some of it was good. He had a really great physiotherapist and kinesiologist who was helping him physically, being at the gym and strengthening after his surgeries and things like that. But then, we also had some cognitive therapy that was really frustrating for him in the sense that it's like little kids games. And he's like, I'm a grown man. I'm not a little child. So give me something of substance that's going to help me.
That makes such a big difference. I mean, for so long, and I've told you this before, so long the therapist put you on a bike and walk away. I mean, it's
Yeah.
do a checklist. And if you don't fight for yourself and say, this is what I want to do with my life, like
Mhm.
my physical therapist bringing a ladder in to therapy so I could practice that, because I was in
Exactly.
construction before. That advocacy is really something for most people that you guys realized it pretty early on, I think, about mutual advocacy.
hmm
What,
Yeah,
what,
I
what,
have experience in advocacy because I do have a daughter with special needs, and so learning advocacy came to me at many years ago. And so, it was an easier thing for me to step into after this accident. However, the mutual advocacy is completely on his end. That was something he brought to the table. That was something that he wanted to do. It wasn't a suggestion on my end by any means. And I'm grateful for that because I, I wouldn't be sure if he could or not, or if, like, so it was a beautiful thing to know that we were sharing this burden together and walking it together, which, I'm really fortunate for, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I'm, how did you manage caregiver burnout?
Oh boy, that's a really great question. And I don't think I've managed it the best, I'll be really honest. I think, on paper it looks really great. But there's many times I've hit that wall and I've collapsed, because you're faced with so many different emotions. So it's not just the tasks that you're doing, it's the emotions that you're feeling around the tasks. It's the emotions that you're feeling about your life as a caregiver, your life as it sits now, the pain and suffering they're experiencing. And so, yes, I could go for a day at the spa, but if I'm not dealing with these internal emotions, it's not really doing me much good.
Did you seek counseling at all, or do you recommend that to other people?
Absolutely, yeah. Counseling is helpful because you need to be able to process your emotions. And, I learned along the way different tools and techniques in order to recognize what I'm feeling and how I'm feeling. So journaling became a really big piece for me, to be able to s- get out all the different feelings I'm feeling and process through those feelings. And sometimes you're feeling emotions that you're even a little bit ashamed of, or you're feeling a little bit guilty about, and recognizing that that's still okay too. This is just a part of life and it's not perfect, and neither are your emotions.
I love it. One of the words that you keep saying, and I love this because most people don't, is assist. You assist each other. There's so many caregivers I've seen that do everything for them. They're not gonna recover quickly that way.
Yeah.
I that assist mindset is, it's captain of your own team. I mean, you
Yeah,
have
and
to
and I
have to
think that
be.
that comes from a loving place. It comes from a pure loving place. You don't want to see your partner, your friend, your loved one struggle. But for me, I understood early on that autonomy is critical for in his recovery, right? He has to
Right.
feel he owns it. I am actually taking more away if I don't let him have that autonomy and let him go through some of those struggles. He doesn't have to go through them alone. We can go through them together. I can be there and be with him during those struggles. But to fix every problem is not going to be the solution. And I'm actually robbing him of who he is by doing that. So yeah, I understand though, like it really comes from a place of love that you're wanting to fix everything. It's just like being a parent. You want to fix everything for your kids. You don't want them to struggle, but you know that they have to. That's how they grow.
That's how they learn, exactly.
Hmm.
You mentioned guilt. Well, how do you recognize that? I mean, what do you mean by guilt?
I think that, well, I know I have faced guilt where I really shouldn't. So
Okay.
when he does something and he fails at it, or and we've tried to work at it several times, and he fails, I feel guilty that I've let him down. I feel guilty that I didn't do enough. And it's a false premise. I shouldn't feel that way, but you do, because you know that, ultimately, you know the tasks and he doesn't. And you're trying to teach, you're trying to guide, you're trying to do it together. And some things are just really challenging.
Yeah.
So there's definitely been times I felt guilt that why didn't I do more? Why couldn't I do more? Why can't I figure this out? Why can't I help more? And that's something that you just need to process and understand, that certain things are out of your control. I think that we're in control of like 2 to 4 things in our day, percent of our day we're in control of. Everything else we're not. So
Yeah.
you know you have to stop feeling that way.
What boundaries do you put in place? Do you both put in place? I should ask, because I love the fact that you guys are such a team. What boundaries have you put in place to protect your peace?
Mm, that's a good question too. I think, having really great communication with your loved one is important, and understanding what they're comfortable with and what they're not. Whether it's in a discussion, whether it's going out to places, doing things, because when someone suffers a traumatic event, what they're capable of doing changes, what they're willing to do changes, what they're able to do changes. And so, ensuring that you're protecting them on that sense, and then making sure too that you understand that your boundaries are different now as well, because your energy is different, your workload is different. So sharing those boundaries together and having a clear understanding of what you can do, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, I think it's really important. And we've navigated that really well. I know exactly what to do and what not to do, and how he reacts and how he doesn't, and he knows me like that as well. And so I know better than to suggest we go to a concert, because it's going to be way too overwhelming for his. It's going to be a sensory overload. So I'm not going to do that. But you know what? I can go to one with my friends or whatever if I want to. Um,
Nice.
so under having that clear communication, I think is really, really a great place to start.
And how do you coach? Well, I know you do coaching, so how do you coach ways to get through this guilt? I mean, what tools do you suggest to survivors and caregivers?
Oh, like I mentioned, journaling is probably one of my top recommendations, simply because that's something that we can all do. We can do it video, we can handwrite, however you want. Yeah, audio, you can journal, you can process. And when we talk, we process. When we write, we process. And getting it out of your head, when it's in your head and you don't do anything with it, it will sit there and it will stew and stew and stew and stew. So you need to get it out, and you need to understand, and asking the questions why, and not
Yeah.
just asking it once, asking it multiple times, because we are like an onion. Our first answer is going to be very superficial. Ask again, dig deeper, dig deeper, dig deeper, and you will come to an answer that resonates deep within you at some point of asking that question. And then at that point you can recognize, okay, I'm feeling this way because that's a me issue. It's not a him issue. It's not a situation issue. It's a me issue.
Great. What, one of the things I recognized later on actually is the importance of patience. I mean, when you're talking it out, some of that becomes confrontational, isn't it? I mean, the importance of having patience. You have to recognize that you need to, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think you is definitely a skill that gets worked. Definitely.
Okay.
Um, but I think importantly, having the conversation of, you know, let me give you an example. So my husband loves to talk a lot. Um, as many people with a brain injury, sometimes they can talk a lot and get off topic completely, and they just go on and they ramble on. And he knows he does this. He knows he struggles with it. He has a hard time controlling it. But he knows that when I touch his hand, that's a kind, loving way of saying, stop, right? You're rambling.
I love
Um,
it.
and so then he'll just go, oh, okay, I got it. And but having the communication in order for him to trust that I'm telling him this because I care for him, not because it's embarrassing me or anything like that. Like, it's coming across for the right reasons, right? And that's where communication is really important. And that patience comes into play. I understand he's struggling. I understand that this is not who he was before, or this is not what he wants to be doing. And so that's where, when you're leading with love, you can have that patience.
Beautiful. Has caregiving reshaped your life's purpose?
Absolutely 100%.
And how?
I couldn't say that any louder, stronger. Yes, it has. It has made me who I am today, and doing the work that I'm doing is simply because of what we faced with my daughter and what we faced with him as a family. And so it's made us into this unit who is trying to help others navigate brain injury, navigate disabilities, or navigate caregiving.
And that manifested itself with Atlas Brain Health, right?
It did, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I've been working in the industry for some time, but going through it on an individual basis, having that lived experience is very, very different than what you could learn academically. And so, having both ends of it, having the education and having that lived experience has meshed into this. I think it's just a beautiful wealth of knowledge and compassion and love that I can help other people with.
Love it. What keeps you going through tough days?
Hope.
Oh, yeah. How
Hmm.
long did it take to really get hope? And that may sound like a really dumb question, but I lost hope for years
Hmm.
until I found different therapies, different stuff. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say I was two very dark moments in my life
Yeah,
that if it wasn't for the pictures of my grandchildren on the wall, I don't know if I'd be here. So, I
yeah.
mean, how do you, how do you get through that?
Honestly, I don't think I ever lost hope. Um, I can't say that for him, but for myself, I always carried hope. And I would like to think that I held it for him in those challenging times, so that when he wasn't able to feel it or see it, I could bring it to his attention. We always focused a lot on gratitudes. I love gratitudes. I'm a really big believer of feeling and saying and doing your gratitudes on a daily basis. And I think that by bringing that to his attention a lot, let's sit back and think about the wonderful things that we have in our life right now, and we would just talk about it. And doing that over and over, I think, gave him a lot more hope as well. I would like to think so. I can't speak for him, but I would like
Yeah.
to think so. But it was never lost for me. I always had hope.
How's his recovery today?
Pardon me?
How is his recovery today?
Amazing. He's doing amazing. He's happy. He's at peace with who he is. He knows who he is. He loves who he is. Um, he is different. In some ways, in a much better way.
Okay.
Maybe not as pig-headed as he used to be. Um, definitely more vulnerable. There's a much softer side that has been exposed, and that comes with that vulnerability. And I think it's fair to say we're an extremely close couple, and I'm proud of that. I'm really grateful for that.
What resources have been helpful for you and or do you recommend to your clients, such as book, podcasts, or groups?
Uh, you know what? Education is number one. Like, educate yourself on as many things as you can, because there's so much available out there that we just don't know about. So you need to be your own advocate, and definitely try and educate yourself. The brain injury associations worldwide, don't limit it to your neck of the woods. Look internationally at different brain injury associations. Unfortunately, they don't all communicate, and it would be wonderful if they did, because the amass of resources that we would have if they did would be astronomical. But there's a lot in Europe, in Australia, the US, Canada. There's so many different associations that have wonderful resources. So, do that, reach out. There's a lot of survivors who have written books as well. And so some of them are fantastic to read, to really just gain an insight on what it's like, because I think that's part of that patience and compassion, is really trying to understand what it's like to go through a massive traumatic event and have your life changed in a second. Understanding that struggle, because, you know, as a caregiver, you're struggling yourself, but you need to understand what they're going through as well. It's definitely two-sided. Um, yeah, you know, there's a lot of podcasts and radio shows like yours, Ralph, you know, that are really advantageous and beneficial, you know, so do get the education that you
And uh, just to connect the two, I mean, I found not only did I check out stroke websites, but I
can.
checked out TBI websites because
Yeah.
stroke and TBI is a brain attack.
Yeah.
No matter how you put it, it's still in the brain. So some
Yeah,
of
they're
those
both an
other,
acquired brain injury. Yeah.
exactly. So some of those other groups out there may help you whether you're stroke or TBI. I mean,
Absolutely. But you know, at the same time, you got to be careful, because there's a lot of snake oil out there too, right?
yes,
So
absolutely.
you want to do your due diligence when you're finding information and resources. Make sure it's scientifically backed information. You know, and sometimes that can be really hard and challenging. That's one of the reasons I have Atlas too, is to provide some of that information, some of that guidance. But yeah, there's a lot of people who will take advantage of individuals, unfortunately. So you got to do your due
Absolutely.
diligence.
Well, and I found too, for example, I don't use AI at all to research a company. I do it myself,
Nice.
because you find out more, you can look up reviews, all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the tools I've found that work for me anyway.
Excellent.
What, what would you say to someone just stepping into the role as a care partner?
Mm. I think I would tell them to be open, be compassionate with their loved one and with themselves, and be willing to learn.
Be willing to?
Be willing to learn.
Oh, nice. I love
Yeah.
that.
You have to be willing to learn about your new partner, their new life, and about resources out there, and about your new life.
Couple of quick questions for you. Caregiving feels like
Mm, love.
the hardest part is
Watching somebody you love struggle.
the most rewarding moment in all of this was or is.
The connection that we've developed over the years because of it.
That's nice. One thing I wish people understood is
Brain injury is often invisible, and just because you can't see the struggle doesn't mean it's not existing. And even as a caregiver, they're struggling, even if you might not see it.
what's a mantra you live by?
Always lead with love.
One word to describe the survivor I support.
One word, sorry.
To describe the survivor I support.
Mm, there's so many wonderful words I can say.
Really?
Yeah, you know, strong. Probably the strongest person I've ever met.
Nice, nice. Stroke Warrior Radio reminds you that
I have a community, and I have resources, and I have people who care.
before we wrap up, what gives you hope today?
What gives me hope is that, you know, brain injury is at the forefront of people's minds. Brain health is at the forefront of people's minds. And our governments are now, every nation is now coming together to support, um, you know, new research and new treatments. And so that gives me a lot of hope that it won't be on the back burner much longer.
Very good. If your journey had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. Oh, you caught me off guard on this.
Well, to give you
I,
an example, one of mine, my top three are Imagine. Um, oh shoot, what was the next one? Celebrate,
mm,
Cool in the Gang.
mm.
Um, and what was the other one? Oh, actually, yeah, Rocky 2. That Scorpion. I use that when I'm exercising at home,
Yeah.
you know.
Uh, yeah, you know
So
what? I don't know if I have one. I know what his would be, but I
what
don't know
would
what
his
mine
be?
would be. White snake, here I go again on my own.
Oh, I love it. That's a
Yeah,
cool one.
yeah.
Excuse me. That is really cool. I'm gonna have to pull that out. That may be our intro song for our joint show.
There you go.
Anything else you want to add?
You know, just that I appreciate everything you're doing and getting the information out there to people in need. And if you're a caregiver, you're not alone. There's so many resources out there for you. There should be more, and hopefully there will be more. I know that there's a lot of advocacy moving forward for that. But you know, you need to look after yourself as well and learn how to communicate with your loved one so that you can have that joint relationship and so you're working together.
How do people find out about Atlas Health, Brain Health?
On the internet, atlasbrainhealth.com. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for sharing your story, Michelle, and your strength and your heart. To every caregiver tuning in, as Michelle said, you're not alone. You're vital to recovery and you are seen. Till next time, stay strong and grounded. And as always, stay a warrior. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Ralph.